they're kind of, oh, let's live for today, not for tomorrow, but they're taking it so seriously that nobody's saving for anything anymore. What are you seeing?
It's very simple why Americans have little or no net worth. Two things: cars and homes. How you buy them and how you finance. You don't go out and buy a brand new car. You buy a car that's 2 years old, coming off lease. Somebody else ate the depreciation in it, 2/3 of what a new car would cost. And once the payments are over, if you have payments, you hold it until it dies. It becomes unsafe or prohibitively expensive to maintain. That's a smart way to do it, but that's not the way Americans do it. Cars nowadays that are prices that houses were when I was first buying cars. The only things that we really buy, that we spend a lot of money on, that we know we're gonna lose money on, right? We know we're gonna lose money on it. As soon as you drive off the lot, you've just lost $10,000, $15,000 in depreciation. So why would we put our money somewhere that destroys our net worth as opposed to build our net worth?
I'm Garrett Wong, and this is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you? Lou, welcome to my podcast.
Great to be with you, Garrett. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, audience, it's been a little bit of tech issues here, but I'm very happy to finally be here with Lou. I've been waiting for this interview for some time. Lou has a variety of experience, but I'm going to let you do that, Lou. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of your background?
All right. Well, I've been a financial advisor for 40 years, 41 years, I should say, which is kind of blows my mind. I have my own financial planning firm for 37 years. So I've been self-employed. I'm a certified financial planner almost all that time. Personal finance author. I authored the book, The Financial Position, which is my brand. It's the name of my podcast. I've been doing a radio show by that title for 25 years, and now it's podcast only at thefinancialposition.com. And I'm also a tax accountant, so we do quite a bit.
Wow. Okay. No, I 41 years.
Yeah, it's seems like yesterday when I started the business, but yeah, time goes fast.
So what?
It's a lot of changes.
Oh, has there ever? Has there ever? What was the sort of primer to get you into the field?
Desperation for a paying job. I went to college. I originally wanted to be a dentist, and I was pre-med at Rutgers. Then I realized I didn't have the grades to get to a dental school in the United States, so I majored in microbiology. So that's what my degree is, with a minor in psychology, which I use every day. I just saw an ad in the New York Times. I live in New Jersey. They were looking for a management trainee, college graduate, and I found out it was a mutual fund company. I didn't even know what a mutual fund was, but my wife encouraged me to go to the interview. Well, my future wife anyway. And I went there early, and when I got to New York, I went to a bookstore, spent an hour reading a financial book on mutual funds, went to the interview. I was Mr. Mutual Fund, and I got my Series 6. And then within 3 years, I had my own firm.
Okay, so
I know, it's kind of an interesting story.
okay, so you're telling me that before an interview, you went to a bookstore and read a book, and then went into the interview and killed it.
Yeah, I took the bus into the Port Authority in New York, got there an hour early, went into Barnes & Noble, sat on the floor with the book in the corner, and read everything I could on mutual funds. And when I went for the interview, they didn't expect me to know anything on mutual funds, but I was so versed on it that they had to hire me on the spot.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Oh, you're my new hero. That kind of redefines fake it till you make it.
That's right.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I'm kind of speechless for a second here. Okay. I actually, you have a broadcast voice, and then I dug into it. I read your bio, obviously. Tell me about the radio show. I mean, The Financial Physician, I think. Is that what it was called back then?
That's what it's called then, and that's what it's called now. For 25 years, that's been my brand, so to speak. It's the title of my book. But what happened was an advertising executive from the biggest radio station on the Jersey Shore came into my office to sell me advertising. And I said, I don't want advertising. I said, I want a show. Because on the weekend, they had brokered programming and they had talk shows on that station. And I said, I wanted a show. And she was able to negotiate with the station to get me a show on Sunday mornings. It was extremely successful. My whole business was built around the show. Almost every client I have came from the radio show. And I did it for 24 years. Sunday mornings were an institution here on the Jersey Shore, and I started uploading the recording of the broadcast on a podcast because it was 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. Sunday mornings. A lot of people don't want to get up 7 a.m. Sunday mornings to listen to a finance show. So we put it on the podcast and people could listen to it at any time. And then a year and a half ago, I decided that there was enough critical mass on the podcast, and that's the future of broadcasting. And I left the radio station and went podcast only. So every Sunday morning at 7 a.m., we upload a 2-hour podcast, which is an eclectic mix of money, markets, politics, current events, and basically whatever I feel like talking about.
So when you were in your job and this advertising exec came by, had you ever wanted to have a radio show?
I actually did have a radio show prior to that. A couple of years prior, I was a guest. First thing you have to know about me, I had a most incredible fear of public speaking, like most people do. I couldn't do a presentation in front of 6 people without not sleeping the night before. Uh, but I was asked, I don't know the details of how it came about, but somebody asked me to be a guest on their program. So I drove to Trenton. I was a guest on this financial show. I was panicked until it started, and I must have did a decent job because the program director came up to me and said, "How would you like to have your own show?" So I was like, "Are you kidding me? Glad I just got through this one, right?" So I cut my teeth at WTTM in Trenton, New Jersey. Once a week, I did a show there. I was horrible. I'm probably a little bit better now than I was 28 years ago when I did my first. So I did 2 years worth of it. It was difficult because I always had a guest. I always had to find a guest, and I had to drive to Trenton. It was about an hour away from my office, so I didn't really get a lot of business from it. So I shut it down. But I longed to do a radio show locally on the Jersey Shore that would benefit my business, but my hometown. I grew up listening to the station. And sure enough, like an angel from God, this woman walked in and completely changed my life and my career path and the success of the firm. Everything I have now has been built around the success of the radio show, and it's been truly a blessing. And I enjoy doing it. I've enjoyed doing it for 25 years, and now I realize that the future is podcasting and podcast only.
That's incredible. What a story. So when you had the radio show before and similar to the podcast format that we're doing now, I mean, I've been doing this for a few years, not 28. And yeah, it's a grind to try to find a guest and then you think and try to get that regular cadence. Like I've been going once every Tuesday for like again 2 years now, but sometimes you kind of run into that wall where you're like, "Oh, I don't have a guest next week," and then you don't wanna pick a lousy guest or maybe a guest cancels on you, so I think we've got a couple months of, guests kind of pre-recorded. The new podcast or sorry, the new radio show, was that more just by yourself, like, just kind of giving updates and things like that, or did you have guests as well?
Well, I learned I hated the guest thing, trying to find guests all the time. That was too much of a grind to do and run my business and everything else. So I decided to do the show alone. I don't have guests on my show very rarely. Once every few months, I may have a guest on my show, but it's 2 hours of just me. Right. And when I was doing the radio show, call-ins, people would call in with personal finance
Oh, yeah.
questions, and then I'd save their problems. I'd solve their problems, or point them in the right direction. And it was just me and my listeners. And that's the way I like it. And even now, I mean, I still do 2 hours. It's almost always just me. And I don't have callers now, and I don't have guests. So it's just me and the microphone, and we get through it. And I enjoy, not having interruptions. I don't have the callers come calling in, and a lot of times the 2 hours are up, and I still have stuff to talk about. So, like I said, we cover a lot of stuff on our show. We cover politics. A lot of people said to me early in my career, "Lou, what are you doing talking about politics when you're supposed to be a financial show?" And I said, "Don't tell me what happens in Washington doesn't affect
100%.
our investments, so inflation, healthcare costs, and all that stuff." So it all ties in together. Now I'm conservative. My show leans conservative. My audience is conservative. But we talk about, I'll talk about anything that I feel like talking about. And that's the great thing about having your own show, your own podcast, is that I don't limit myself to what I can talk about. I talk about healthcare at times. I talk about things that are happening in my life personally, that are in my practice. But we mix it up. The first hour is usually personal finance, what's going on in markets, the economy, the Fed, and all that stuff. We'll talk about that this week. And then the second hour segues into current events and politics and all that kind of stuff. So my listeners like that mix. Some of my listeners will come in and zip right across to the second hour because they're political animals. That's what they like. My wife's one of them. She doesn't want to hear the financial stuff, so she goes straight to the political stuff. Other people like the personal finance stuff, and they'll listen to the first hour, but they don't really care for the political stuff, and maybe they'll stop listening there. And most of my listeners like both, so they'll consume both hours of the program. And the good thing about the podcast is that nobody has to sit down and listen to 2 hours all at once. They can listen to the first hour, and then a couple of days later listen to the second hour if that's what they choose. The most of our listeners download the show and listen on Sunday. They're used to listening to me on Sunday mornings. It's kind of been a tradition over a quarter of a century. They have breakfast with me, or they listen to me driving to church or whatnot, and they enjoy listening on Sunday morning. So we get more than half of our downloads on Sunday because I upload the show at 7 a.m., just like I did my radio show for 25 years. And that's where most of the people listen to the program.
So when you're trying to think of content every week for 2 hours, I mean, how scripted are you? Do you kind of have an outline, or do you just turn on the mic, hit record, and let it flow?
Well, during the week, I'm printing out articles and stuff all week long. I got a pile of stuff. Then I organize it, and I don't like to be scripted. I don't like to be too planned out. I like to fly by the seat of my pants. Now, when I was doing radio for 2 hours, there's no stopping. The light goes on, you take your commercial breaks, but the 2 hours you go through it, and that's that. When you do a podcast, I could stop. And I do a lot. I never stop, obviously, during radio, but now knowing that I can, if I think I could do a segment a little bit better, I'll stop it and I'll re-record it. And that gives me, and I find out that I'm trying to be too perfect, and I don't want to be perfect. If I stumble on some words, that's natural. That's being a human being. But where it used to take me 2 hours to do a radio show, of course I had to do the prep for it. But now it takes me about 8 to 10, because now I have to, as you know, you have to do the audio mixing, and I put in audio clips from the news. I cut in there. Then I have to mix it, convert it to MP3, upload it to Podomatic, all the stuff that goes into podcasting, which was a kind of a steep learning curve for me, because I had an engineer in the radio station. And he would do all that for me. He'd just upload it, to the platform on the podcast, and that was that. But I had to learn very quickly how to use GarageBand and all that stuff, and I've gotten pretty good at it after almost 2 years. I never thought I'd have. I'm not very technologically advanced. Being the advanced age that I am in my mid-60s, I get by with tech, but I taught myself, and I'm pretty proud of the way I've become pretty proficient in podcast editing and all that kind of stuff, mixing.
Yeah, when you mentioned during the early days with the show that the benefit of it, and your company wouldn't be there where it was, or the company you were working for, how did that radio show affect your employer?
My employer has always been me. I'm the
Okay.
president and CEO of AFM Investments. I established the firm in 1987, the week prior to the stock market crash, with
Okay.
a partner of mine that I met at a previous firm that we worked at. I was 27, he was 27. We scraped together 10,000 each. We opened up a small office, a branch office of a national brokerage firm, and we built it from there. And once I started doing the radio show, it was magic. Just the clients that came through the door was mind blowing to me. And the thing is that, you want to talk about a selling proposition. These people are coming in pre-sold. They've listened to me for a long time. They know how I think. And they would come in and say, "Lou, please take my money and manage it for me." A pretty good sales situation to be in, not having to sell myself, having the credibility to do it. And being a certified financial planner and accountant, having those credentials, obviously didn't hurt either. But I would say over $100 million in investments came through the front door from the radio show.
Yeah, I think for those of you who are listening to this podcast, I mean, I get approached all the time with, how do you even keep up once a week? Why are you doing this? You're so busy. You've got all these other things. And my original answer when I started this 2 years ago was, labor of love. It was kind of on my bucket list. I've always wanted to have a podcast. and I just didn't know how. I finally hit record, and now I do it, I don't know, because I love it, because I can choose my guests, and I create relationships and bring value and get value from it. But that the credibility that you get from a podcast, I think that's what people don't really realize. I think they just need to hit record and get out there. But I think there's some kind of stat out there. You might know this, Lou, about how many podcasts start and never go past like 5 episodes, I think, or something like that. Do you recall anything?
Probably, I think something like 75% or 80% of podcasts don't even get through the first 4 or 5.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
Because if you're starting from scratch, you probably are self-conscious. Uh, Even the sound of your voice, it took me a while to get used to the sound of my own voice. I thought it was horrible when I first started broadcasting. So you have to get used to the sound of your own voice and like it. You're starting with virtually no audience except your grandmother and your aunts. So that's the a discouraging thing. Am I talking to the wall? Yeah, am I wasting my time? And it's daunting to start a podcast from scratch. Thankfully, I had the radio show, so the podcast was just carrying the radio show for convenience for listeners. So I was getting hundreds of downloads of the podcast before I even thought anything about it. And I wasn't doing a podcast; I was doing a radio show that
Hmm.
was being ported over to the podcast. And then when I started the podcast only, I already had 600, 700 downloads a week, coming into it, and we're building it from there. Uh, and uh, and now, one thing about a radio show, people could stumble upon you. They're driving down the highway and they're going through the radio stations. They stumble upon you. They like what they hear, and now you have a new listener and
Yeah.
potentially a new client. But on podcasts, people don't stumble upon a podcast. Usually, somebody else who listens to it has to tell you about it, or they have to put it on a forum, or you have to be a guest on somebody else's podcast. Like I'm a guest on yours. That brings more people to your podcast. It's
Right.
cross pollination kind of thing going on. So it's a whole different animal, and I couldn't imagine starting a podcast from scratch without any broadcast experience and without following a radio platform.
It hasn't been easy. I mean, what I did, like I often do, is what I call holding the flashlight. Um, Now, I mean, almost literally, because I'm in real estate, on my very first rental when I bought it when I was 27. Um, Sidebar, and I do tend to go down rabbit holes. You mentioned microbiology. I don't know how many guests I've had on here because I have a microbiology undergrad degree and then pivoted, right? Like, what does that have to do with business? Maybe it's a precursor. But anyhow, digressing here. No, I like to hold the flashlight for, get a plumber in, offer to hold the flashlight, learn the plumbing, learn the whatever you're going to do, and then eventually in a rental property, try to figure that out. So when I wanted to do a podcast, I went to a podcast company out in Toronto here up in Canada and asked them, so obviously I signed a year contract. I kind of learned about everything. They did some things I liked, some things I didn't. Like, for example, it was audio only, and now I'm on video. So after that was done, I just figured, well, why spend that expense? I'm going to try to experiment now. At least I had a base of turning on the microphone, figuring things out, knowing. And then, of course, I had to do what you're doing now is mixing, video editing. And now, of course, I have my own video editor, but it's a learning curve. It's a real learning curve.
Yeah, I stayed mostly audio. Because I've been on radio. I'm an audio guy. That's where I come from. People don't see you when they're listening to the radio. But I do some video as well. Usually the opening financial topic, I'll videotape and put it on the Rumble channel, to build that platform as well. But I don't record the entire podcast, usually just financial topics in the beginning, because those, people could search for that stuff, social security explained, something like that. I want that as a video because I want that on Rumble. I've been banned from YouTube for life, so that platform no longer is available to me because of certain things I said on the radio show. uh, that I would put on YouTube regarding an election 4 years ago, regarding a certain medical procedure that people were doing to avoid getting sick, and apparently that was not within the community guidelines of YouTube. I'm hoping to
Wow.
get back sometime anyway. But so we moved to Rumble, and we have a bunch of videos there too. But you're right. I mean, I don't do the audio video editing. I have a guy that does that. That's above my pay grade.
Pretty labor intensive. Yeah. No, we won't even go down that rabbit hole there. Interesting. I'd like to talk to you about that offline though. Let's talk about why you're really here. Financial planning. You gave me a variety of topics, and as I said in our precursors, saving for retirement, right? I have two, I guess they're not young anymore, 20 and a 22-year-old, two boys. I just get the feeling, the sentiment out there that the concept of saving for retirement is so like out there onto the horizon that most young people aren't, they're kind of, oh, let's live for today, not for tomorrow, but they're taking it so seriously that nobody's saving for anything anymore. What are you seeing?
Yeah, exactly that. But not only is it young people, it's older people. The big change I've seen in my career, uh, say the first, I've been doing this 41 years. So let's say the first 25 years when I sat down with somebody's entering retirement, their home was paid off almost all the time. They didn't have car payments. They bought cars for cash. Many of them had pensions back in the day and Social Security, and they were very financially secure. They would downsize, free up some equity for investments, and to live a very comfortable life. Now I'm seeing people enter retirement that have a traditional mortgage. They have two car payments, maybe student loans for their kids, credit cards, no pension, not enough saved in their 401ks. Uh, and you're going to see a retirement crisis in America. It's here already. Uh, you're going to see elderly poverty in this country, I fear, like we've never seen before, because Americans, my generation and younger, I'm 64. So I'm the beginning of that generation that was a consumer generation. My parents were different. They didn't buy anything, unless they had the cash to buy it and so forth. But our generation is constantly advertised to go buy the new car, go buy the new computer, iPad, all that stuff. And we live beyond our means. Example, when I was growing up, I'm the oldest of six kids. I don't come from money, you know. My father was a union printer. My mother was a waitress, six kids. We lived in a Cape Cod with one bathroom, believe it or not. And we got by. My dad bought a new car in 1966, a Ford station wagon. I was 6 years old. When I turned 17, it became my car. When I turned 19, it became my younger brother's car. So you could see, people kept cars for a long time. When I was younger, there was jalopies. You ever heard that term before?
Oh, yeah.
You're too young there. A
No, no.
jalopy was an older car
Yeah.
where the muffler's dragging. You had to tie it up with a coat hanger.
Yeah.
You just ran it into the
I own
town.
many. Yeah, I own many.
All right, so did I. And nowadays, you buy a car every 3-4 years. As soon as the payments are over, you want to run and get the newest, nicest car. So Americans have perpetual car. That's one big problem. Now, in my book, I mentioned uh, it's very simple why Americans have little or no net worth. Two things: cars and homes, how you buy them, and how you finance. All right. There's a whole chapter in my book about how to buy a car. You don't go out and buy a brand new car. You buy a car that's 2 years old, coming off lease. Somebody else ate the depreciation in it, at least the first couple of years depreciation. You buy it with 25,000 miles on it, 2/3 of what a new car would cost. And once the payments are over, if you have payments, you hold it until it's dying. It becomes unsafe or prohibitively expensive to maintain. All right. That's a smart way to do it. But that's not the way Americans do it. Nowadays with cars nowadays that are prices that houses were when I was first buying cars, right? So you take it out a mortgage, a 7-year mortgage, 8-year mortgage when you're buying a car. The average car payment is somewhere between $500 and $1,200 a month now. Many of them over $1,000, and that's where people's money is going. So when I see say a pre-retired couple, they come to me, they're in their low to mid 50s. The kids are just getting out of college and they say to me, Lou, I want to start retirement plan. We make decent money, but we don't seem to be able to put any away. All right, well, let's see where your money goes. And I find out that they have a $3,500 a month mortgage payment because they went out and bought an $800,000 home. They have two car payments of $600-700 each for the husband and the wife. They have some credit card debt. Uh, well, no wonder why you can't save for retirement. All your money's going to debt service, going to pay for cars, going to pay for houses, and people buy too much house, too expensive cars, and buy them too frequently, and finance them for a long time, so they're guaranteed to be underwater. Cars are the only things that we really buy, that we spend a lot of money on, that we know we're going to lose money on. All right, we know we're going to lose money on it. As soon as you drive off the lot, you've just lost $10,000, $15,000 in depreciation. So why would we put our money somewhere that destroys our net worth, as opposed to build our net worth, right? And there's another thing too. Interest. Interest is a four-letter word. I call debt cancer to the financial body in my book. The Financial Physician: How to Cure Your Money Problems and Boost Your Financial Health. It's been out since 2010. I mean, it's 15 years old. The concepts haven't changed. It's a very basic book to read. It's meant for, younger couples just get married, how to get on the right track and not go down the wrong track financially, and how to look towards the future and stuff like that. How to figure out how much house you can afford to buy, and how to buy cars and all that kind of stuff. But I use medical analogy to finance. And I say, like, hey, credit card debt, cancer to the financial body. If you have credit card debt, and I tell you, I just saw somebody in here retired with $35,000 in credit card. Now, interest is non-productive expenditure. You get nothing back from interest that you pay. All right, you pay interest on a car. Yeah, you get to drive the car, but where does that money go? You're paying for that car not once, but maybe twice by the time the 7 or 8 years are old, and you pay all the interest, especially now when interest rates are higher.
Right.
Same is true of a house, of course, right? So interest, you want to be earning interest, not paying it. I'll give a secret to all your listeners. You want to be successful financially, earn interest, don't pay interest. Sign the back of checks, not the front of checks.
Nice. I'm going to use that one. I like that.
That's the difference between financial success and failure. So again, it comes down to Americans living beyond their means, not being patient to acquire things. They want to have it now. They don't care how they finance it, whether it's a credit card, whether it's taken out a loan. They want what they want when they want it. The future that's so far away. I'll deal with that when it comes. Unfortunately, I'm eligible for Social Security. I'm not taking it yet. I'm still working, but I'll give you guys a secret. The future comes, right? And it comes faster than you think it will come, right? And the earlier you start saving and compounding money and investing money, obviously the more you're going to have at the end. And the numbers are staggering. I mean, I've talked about them on my show many times. If you start in your mid-20s, just doing an IRA account, even if you don't fully fund it, but doing something, if you wait just 5 or 6, 7, 8 years, you have to save so much more money for the rest of your life to get the same amount of money you'll have if you start when you're young. So you're absolutely right. You brought it up that, young people don't see the future, but you don't have to be that late, but at least start in your 30s. Don't come to me in your 50s telling me you want to start retirement planning at that point, because that's almost an impossible task at that point. And unfortunately, most Americans, you hear the statistics, 2/3 of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. Well, and now with the inflation we've had to deal with, that's more money that's going towards basic necessities, and less money available to put in our 401k or put in the college savings plan or whatever for the future. And unfortunately, Americans' financial security and standard of living, especially in retirement, has dropped substantially, and unfortunately will continue to drop. And I think it's a major crisis in America.
So okay, I agree 100% that we're heading towards a crisis. I would almost say, like, what needs to happen? Do we have to have a different movement? Like, what is going to change people's minds, perceptions, attitudes to living for tomorrow, not for today, with balance, of course? Because, I mean, not even in 10 years, but when my kids, get to be 50, 60, 70 years old, I won't be here, but I mean, what is the world going to look like?
Unfortunately, I think that you need to have a major financial crisis. People, I'm talking about the depression level crisis,
Yeah.
where everything gets wiped out and people realize that uh, we have to start over. We have to think of money differently. We have to think of consumption differently. We have to be more patient in things that we want in life. We have to prioritize expenditure where our money goes. And that's the thing for most individuals. They have no idea where their money goes. And I say, do an analysis of where your money goes. Take a 3-month period, right? Write down every dollar you spend. And I mean every dollar. I'm talking about you go into Starbucks and get a $5 coffee. You want to know about it. Have a little spiral notebook in your back pocket. Write down everything for a whole quarter, because that covers, car insurance, property taxes, things that come not monthly, but quarterly sometimes. Then analyze it and see where your money goes, and then decide where I can cut. How many subscriptions that we have, whatever it is, Netflix, whatever, that we don't even use. I know I'm guilty of it. I have some subscriptions I pay for every month, but I can't remember the last time I used it, right? Find out where there's waste in your life, and figure out where I can cut and where I can redeploy that money. If you have debt, that's the first place it's got to go. All right, is you've got to eliminate debt in your life, especially the highest interest debt, which is usually the credit card, which is always the credit card.
Right.
And unfortunately, Americans, because they're living beyond their means, or their means just hasn't kept up with inflation, are more and more using credit cards to get by. And we're seeing that in the outstanding credit card balances in the country, which have hit record highs. At the same time, the interest rates are at record highs. It is truly a shame, and it's debt that a lot of people are not going to get out from under. And many of them are looking at bankruptcy now. I get a lot of calls from not necessarily my clients because they have money. My clients come to me to invest money. That's mainly what I do. I'm a money manager.
Right.
But their kids are in trouble. And a lot of times the kids will call me and say, Lou, look, this is my financial situation. What do you recommend? Sometimes I recommend bankruptcy. You need a fresh start, because you're not going to pay off $40,000 in credit card. You're not going to do it, right? Unless you win the lottery, because the minimum payments, just the interest alone on that. Think about it. Just say you have $40,000 in credit card debt. The interest is 20%. That's $8,000 a year just on the interest alone. What is that? $650 a month? Something like that. It's just going into money heaven. It's just disappearing out of your life. Does nothing for you, right? So how are you going to pay down that principal? All right. Yeah, there's different strategies to pay off credit card debt if it's not egregious. Pay off the highest interest first, pay the minimums on everything else, pay the higher interest rate down till it goes to zero, attack the next one with the highest interest, or pay as much as you can, pay the minimums on the rest, and just whittle away at it. But to get those funds to do it, you have to give up going out to eat, going out to the bars with your friends, buying a new TV that you don't necessarily need, but you want. That car, those car payments stop. Keep driving that same car. Don't run out and get a new one. Things that you have to change in your lifestyle. This is not an easy thing to do to get on the right track financially. There's sacrifice involved, and it's painful. But what is the alternative? To be impoverished in retirement? That's not a good thing to do either. It's not a good place to be anyway.
So when let's put it into a top 5 list. Okay. I'm hoping actually to publish this. I'm going to bump this up because I know that I'm publishing well into like February, March next year. Like audience, it's like a week before Christmas right now, as we're recording this with Lou. I'm going to actually bump this just after New Year's, when everybody's thinking about New Year's resolutions. They've looked at their Christmas credit card bill and they're horrified. What would your top 5, if you could even put top 5, because I know you've got like 25 common money things in your book, but your top 5 recommendations for somebody to start saving for retirement today?
First of all, you have to become financially literate. All right. Financial illiteracy is the main reason people fail financially. Uh, Thankfully, they're starting to teach it in schools now. My biggest pet peeve is that we waste our kids' time in school teaching them all kinds of bull crap that they did are going to get them nowhere in life.
Yeah.
Who cares about the War of 1812? They teach them how to balance a checkbook, how credit cards work, what a mortgage is, what is a mutual fund, taxes, basic things that we have to deal with every day in our life. And financial literacy is the number one reason people fail. It's the number one. It's the chapter one of my book. Um, uh, why Americans fail financially is they don't know what to do to begin with. So, how could you start improving your financial scenario if you don't at least know what you're doing wrong, what you're doing right, and how to get to the right place? So teach yourself. My book. I'm not pushing my book. It's been out 15 years. I give them away for free. As a matter of fact, if you go to thefinancialphysician.com, which is my website, has all my podcasts there, there's a free electronic book you can download. And it's very nice. PDF, it's beautiful. A beautiful copy of the book. And it is something that is easy to read. It's not financially, like I said, it was really written for like young adults just getting married to learn the basics of financial responsibility, the basics of investing, debt management, and all that kind of stuff. And it's a very popular book. People who read it like it because it is not complicated to read. You could actually read it in one sitting if you really wanted to. That's a good book to read. There's lots out there, of course. We're not doing. There's lots of podcasts, websites that you can go to. You don't have to be a financial expert. Just know the basics, of what to do. Number two, look at your spending, analyze, know where your money is going, right? And then analyze it, figure out what am I spending money on that I don't have to spend it on. You got to be disciplined. You got to take a look at your life and say, I can't keep going this way. I don't need all this stuff. I don't need to go shopping every weekend to buy new clothes. Or whatever it is that we spend our money on. We all have our habits, And that's another thing. If you have vices, well, you got to deal with those vices because vices cost a lot of money. Whether I'm talking about gambling, football betting, lottery. How many of my clients spend tons of money on lottery? It's ridiculous.
Really?
I call lottery a tax on the stupid. Your chances of winning are very, very small. And every week I know people. I know people, loved ones of mine, that have a problem with it. Drinking, smoking is costly. Whatever vices we have out there. I have somebody I know very closely. They don't have a pot to pee in. They're struggling to get by all the time. Husband and wife both smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. How much is a pack of cigarettes these days? $10? I don't know.
I have no
I
idea.
don't smoke. Yeah, but I was in a local convenience store and I was behind somebody and they asked for a carton of Marlboro or whatever it was. It was $115 for a carton of cigarettes. And they'll probably smoke that in a week, right? So these two people, husband and wife, they both drink about a 6-pack of beer a day, and they smoke 4 packs of cigarettes between them. Now, if you do the math, then you times it by 31 days in a month, it was something like well over $1,000 a month they were spending on cigarettes and beer. So don't tell me that you have no money to save or you can't get ahead and you don't know why. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There's other reasons why they waste money and stuff like that. So find out where your money goes, find out where you can cut and what. And then number 3, look at your debt and pay it down as best you can with the money that you have just found by cutting away the bad expenditures that you have. Another thing you want to do, I tell everybody to do at the beginning of the year, is do a net worth statement. Where's your assets? What do you own? You don't need a special form to do it, although my book has a template in it. Just take a piece of paper, draw a line right down the middle, vertically. On the left-hand side, write your bank accounts, your
Assets. Yeah.
the value of your home, your cars, anything that you own that has value. On the left-hand side, write a list of all your debt against that. Your mortgage balance, credit card balances, any interest rates on all these debts. And then your net worth is very simple. You subtract your asset value, your total asset value. You subtract the debt, total debt that you have, and that's your net worth. And when people come to see me for the first time, I ask them trick questions all the time. Could you tell me basically what your net worth is? and they look at me like a dog, like, or I don't know. And they're never close. They usually, well, sometimes they underestimate, sometimes they overestimate, but they have no idea because they've never done a very simple calculation of that. Uh, and then you do the budget. Where's my income coming from, and where's my income going, and is it positive? If you take the expenditures, subtract it from all your income, after tax income, I should say, is that a positive number? Well, if it's a positive number, then you should be saving that amount of money, all right, or paying down debt with that amount of money. If it's a negative number, well, the only way you could have a negative number in your budget is if you go into debt to finance your deficit spending. Kind of sounds like the U.S. government, doesn't it? We spend more than we bring in, so we borrow it. But Americans, the way they borrow is through credit cards, which is the worst borrowing you possibly can get. So, these are things that people need to do each and every year, sometimes more than once a year, but they don't want to do it. Most people would rather go to a dentist to get a root canal than analyze their financial situation, do a budget, and try to stick to a budget, try to change their priorities. Americans don't want to do it, and it's very difficult. That's why I'm very frustrated as a financial advisor. I don't want to deal with young people. I don't. Very rarely do I deal with anybody who's not retired. Uh, I am a senior financial planner, and I have been most of my career. I learned early in my career that the older people had all the money and the younger people had all the debt. Okay. So if I'm going to get paid based on assets under management, I'm going to go where the money was. And I learned that it was the seniors who were retired who had the money. And I became an expert in senior financial issues. And I deal with retired people. I'm a relatively conservative financial advisor because of that. But now after 41 years in this business, a lot of my clients are at the end of their lives. We lose them all the time, and I've become an expert at end of life issues, and generational wealth transfer and things that we have to do at this point. But young people are undisciplined, and many times I'll deal with my older clients' kids. When I say kids, maybe they're in their 40s and 50s. They're not children, but they're not disciplined. They'll start putting money away. They'll start investing it. And then they call us up and said, I need $5,000. I got to pay off this credit card debt I have. So they just start going the other way with it. And I have no patience for that. I got to be honest with you. I'm very blunt with my clients, potential clients. I tell it like it is. And a lot of times it's tough love and they don't want to hear it, and I don't want to engage in that back and forth with younger people with small amounts of money. Look, I'd love to help them. I like to get them on the right track. Here's my book. Read it. That'll help you. But older people are much more disciplined and with their investments and with their money. And I prefer to deal with that kind of person.
Well, and that's completely fair. But we started off the conversation by talking about the younger generation. I mean, I am concerned for my kids. How much? I mean, I know that's a loaded question, but for somebody who's starting out, even in their 30s, but let's say mid 20s, you can convince somebody to put something away. What is the end goal? Has it changed where, like, when I was growing up, it was like pay off your house, don't have any debt, have this amount of money, by a certain date, and then you start living off interest and these things and government payments and pension, and if you have any of that, with, again, all of these things, house payments, car payments, lease car payments, how much do you think somebody realistically has to save and can save as a 25, 30-year-old for the next 30 years?
Unfortunately, my feeling is that the country is going to go through a major financial crisis. Uh, uh, we've gone through an inflationary spike in 2022. We're still living with it to some extent. I think that is nothing compared to what's coming. We've been mismanaged our country for so long. Deficit spending. Look, I'm a student of economic history, and I did a series of reports on my program on the radio a couple of years back about historic inflations and the end of economic empires and how it happens, starting with the Roman Empire. We can go all back because human nature never changes. So it's always the same. A country starts to become powerful. They manufacture a lot. They produce a lot. A lot of money starts coming into their country. They have a surplus. They use it for military expansion to expand the resources that are available to that country. They wind up spending too much on their expansion and their empire. The people that live in that country realize that they can get stuff out of the government in the form of benefits of some kind. And then all of a sudden the country goes into deficit. Small deficit at first, but they start financing it by issuing bonds. The rest of the world is more than happy to buy those bonds because the country's economy is so strong and great and they're so powerful. And then the deficits start becoming very great. The debt keeps going up. The interest on that debt goes up. Foreigners no longer have the confidence in that country to want to invest in that debt. The central bank starts printing money to finance the debt as the buyer of last resort. That debases the currency, causing inflation at first, and then ultimately currency collapse and hyperinflation. Unfortunately, it's my belief that we are going to experience that in our lifetime, in my lifetime, and I'm 64. So I'm talking about the next 20 years.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong. I really hope. I don't want my kids to have to live through that. So it's very difficult in 2024 to tell somebody who's 25 years old how much money they're going to need. Maybe they're going to need $28 million to retire with come 40 years from now. I don't know. But I can't do the same planning now that I did when I first started in this business. You know, when the country was financially stable, we didn't have huge deficits. Just think about how much right now we'll put on $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. Every 100 days. It took 200 years to have the first $1 trillion of debt in this country. And look at us now. You know, just in the last 20, 25 years, we're up to 36 trillion in debt with $1 trillion plus in interest each and every year, which again is a waste of resources because it doesn't bring us anything.
Right.
So you know, that is always a bad thing, whether it's in a family, whether it's an individual has it, whether a country has it. And unfortunately, this country now is past its prime. Now, I love my country. I want the best for my country. I want obviously the best for my kids and grandkids. But I'm a realist, and again, an economic historian. We are on the path now of currency collapse and hyperinflation. The only reason it hasn't happened yet is because of the reserve status of the U.S. dollar, which is being chipped away every day around the world. You know, I'm sure you know about the BRICS countries coming together. They're going to have their own currency eventually. They're already trading in their own local currencies. The dollar is not being used as much to trade oil and other things. You know, we made a deal with the Saudi Arabians. I think it was 1971. You know, we'll protect you and we'll give you all the military equipment you want. Just price oil in dollars, and nobody could buy your oil except in dollars. And then take those dollar profits and recycle them into our treasuries and finance our debt. Well, that's over now. You know, now Saudi Arabia is selling oil in other than U.S. dollars. Many countries are not dealing anything in U.S. dollars. China and Russia are doing their own thing. The BRICS are coming together. So it's only a matter of time now that the U.S. reserve currency status is no longer what it was. And we're going to have a very, very bad, a very bad inflationary problem. But you look back, it's always the same recipe that I just laid out before. Whether it's Rome, whether it's the Weimar Republic in Germany in the 20s, Yugoslavia in the 40s, which was the worst inflation ever, Zimbabwe, Argentina, how many times? It's all the same. You know, it's the same recipe. And how can we think that it's going to be different this time when we're doing it bigger than any empire in history has ever done? It's going to end the same way. And like I said, I always say this on my show. I hope I'm wrong. I pray that I'm the biggest idiot in the world for saying that. All right. Because I don't want to be right. All right. Now, there's ways of protecting yourself against that. We can talk about precious metals and things like that. You know, there is people who have protected themselves. I've protected myself against that eventuality. And I sleep well at night. And I've advised my clients to do the same thing. But, you know, how do you advise a young couple in their 20s about how much they need to save and what the dollar is going to be worth? And is there even going to be dollars, or there's going to be a new currency? I don't know. And it's very difficult to be a financial planner for people. It's more difficult for me now than any time in my career because of the unknowns that we're dealing with now. Geopolitically, politically, the country's fiscal status that I just laid out. How do you advise people like that under that scenario where we have so many unknowns going forward? And the one thing that I do know is that it will end badly. Now, hopefully it can be pushed off 20 years, 10 years. I don't know what it is, but it could be next year where it starts to unravel. So very, very tough to do long-term planning for people. Just the best thing you can do is get out of debt and spend money on things that you have to spend money on, and start squirreling the money away and get yourself an emergency fund. I mean, that's the number one thing people need to do before they even talk about investing. People call me up and say, Lou, I want to start investing. What should I do? Well, how much money do you have in your emergency fund? Well, I just saved like 10 grand, but I want to invest the 10 grand. No, you don't. You're not going to invest the 10 grand. You're not going to invest it with me because you need that liquid. You need 6 months living expenses, liquid. I don't care what rate of return it gets, right? Until you do that, don't even talk to me about investing. Because what's going to happen is if you don't have that and all of a sudden you need 4 new tires for $1,000, you're going to rip out the credit card at 22% interest, and that's the way you're going to finance it. And that's why you'll never get ahead. If you have a rainy day fund, emergency fund, whatever you want to call it, then you have money to handle those unexpected expenditures because, as we all know, life happens.
Wow. I interviewed a lot of financial planners, none with your breadth of experience and the radio experience and all of that. This has gone completely different direction, and I do appreciate that because, and you know what, I'd like to actually have you back on at some point because I'd like to do a deeper dive on this collapse that we're talking about, what people can kind of do to protect themselves if it happens, and I pray that it doesn't as well. But I agree with you that there's definitely some collapse happening. Um, I'd like to give you the last word, however, because I always ask my guests, a little frazzled here, Lou. I'd like to ask you, because I always ask my guests the same question on every episode. This is the Investing to Win podcast. How do you define success, and what does winning look like for you?
Winning looks like for me the ability to have the resources to do the things in life that make me happy, that make my wife happy, that make my kids happy. The freedom. That's all that financial success really is freedom. Freedom to do what you want. If that means going to Europe and spending 2 weeks there, you have to have the resources to do that. All right. That's freedom. That gives you the opportunity to do that. Freedom to be able to help others who are in need. Recently, it's Christmas. I made a sizable donation to a local food bank, right? And I did it anonymously. I that to me is freedom, to be able to have the resources to be able to do that. And I'm not patting myself on the back for that. I'm just happy that I had the ability to maybe help some families that are struggling right now because their finances aren't there. So that's what success in investing is. It's freedom to do the things in life that you want to do. It's also freedom from stress. Financial stress, I've
Yeah.
lived it. We've all lived it. Nothing's worse than juggling bills and getting phone calls from bill collectors. And it affects your relationships with your spouse. And, I lived it. When I was growing up, we were poor. I mean, to say we weren't dirt poor, but my dad was out of work for 3 years in the mid 70s during the recession there. And I'll never forget it. I mean, we were on welfare and food stamps. And I remember going shopping with my dad and him using a credit card. I remember getting free lunches at school because our income was so low. And I was so embarrassed to use those little tickets they would give you. I would not eat because I was too embarrassed. And I'll tell you, the reason I bring that story up is because that's what motivated me never to be in that situation. My kids were never going to get a free lunch. And that motivated me to be successful in life and do the things that I needed to do, to work my butt off, to watch how I spend my money, and to make sure that my kids, number one, and then me later on in my future, do not have any financial stress. And I don't. Getting debt free, uh, which I got, came debt free about 12 years ago. No mortgage, no car payment, no credit card, no student loans, nothing. Uh, it's a great feeling because now all that extra money is freed up for you to invest, for you to be charitable with, for you to help your kids out, or for you to do the things that you want in life. And that's what investing to win is all about, in my opinion. And it's not investing to win, it's just running our financial lives in a winning way.
Well said. Well, we're definitely going to have to do part two. I will throw the into the show notes links to your show, your book. Thank you, Lou. It's been a great time hanging out with you here. And you saw I've been taking notes down here, and some of those zingers and those quotes. So thanks for spending time with me today.
Yeah, and if people want to be more engaged in that, spend time with me each and every week on my podcast. I mean, we talk about all these things. If nothing else, you'll get an education or some eye-opening things, because we talk about things on my program that you're not going to hear anywhere else.
All right. Well said. All right. Take care, and thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.